This is Beyond the Veil with Norman Meredith.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for the second episode of Beyond the Veil with me, your host, Norman Meredith. How's everybody doing tonight? Tonight we have special guest Suzanne Madron, a author of a variety of novels. I'm going to let her talk about what she writes, and then we're going to talk about some encounters that she's had of the paranormal sort. Welcome, Susan. Thanks for coming to be on my show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about your books and all that. Tell us a little bit what you write, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about your paranormal encounters that I've heard about. I'm impressed and I am jealous that some of the encounters you've had. They're better than the ones I've had, that's for sure.
Well, let's see. I write speculative fiction, horror, noir, mystery, occult, etc. And as far as my encounters, so I live in a haunted house. Like this house behind me is my haunted house, and we've got everything from not reenactors. They're actual civil soldiers wandering around the neighborhood, and we've got the closest. I never knew what these were until I moved here. They're called albatwitches, and we've got one that kind of wanders through every once in a while. And then my first paranormal experience when I came here was when I was 16. I visited Gettysburg, and I never knew what reenactors were outside of, say, Valley Forge. You know, when you have historical places up in northeastern Pennsylvania and New York, they usually just stick in the historical spot. So Gettysburg was this whole new ball game for me, where there's reenactors everywhere. And we were walking through, and I'm 16, and I see these guys, and they're staring into fire, and I'm thinking they're mannequins. And then they start moving. So they explained the whole concept of the reenactor to me at that point. And so the next day we go to Little Round Top, and of course it's a castle, and I'm a goth, so I love castles, and I go running up to the observation deck for the uninitiated at Gettysburg. It's the 144th New York Monument, and it looks like all the monuments designed to look like chess pieces.
Right.
So this is a little castle, and it's got an observation deck that's about a floor up, and it's a decent drop down to bolt. So I go running up there, and I see this guy in Union uniform, but it looks weird. It looks almost like a high school band uniform.
Right.
He's coming across like that, and he's got dark hair, and he looks to be all of 18, maybe 20 tops. So he was about my age, and I'm thinking, wow. And he looked all sad, and I was like, hey, it's not like we didn't win, right? And he just looked at me like he had never seen me, and looks me up and down, really confused, and says, we won? And I started laughing. I'm like, of course we won, I'm like, duh. And my friends come running up, and they're like, who are you talking to? I'm like, Mr. 1863 over here. The war's still going on. And I turn around and I look, and this dude is gone. There's nobody on the observation deck with me at all.
The one question I got to ask of you is, how corporal was he? Because there's corporal and incorporeal.
I honestly thought he was a reenactor. I thought he was a regular person, like standing in front of me. Like if I'd reached out, I could have touched him.
Wow. So you think he was a ghost, paranormal figure, or I'm going to ask this question. Do you think he was a figment in time that was stranded in a segment of time that just popped up? That's why maybe he looked sad or tired, and that's why he was where he was at that moment, that he looked so real, that maybe was lost in time.
Well, I mean, I would think that, and I did think that, except that the monument was not there during the Civil War. And
Okay.
in fact, fast forward, oh gosh, many, many years. And one of my friends, I was telling her the story, and she's one of the battle tour guides. So she
Mm-hmm.
took me through the museum to see if we could find the uniform that this guy
Right.
was wearing, so we could get an idea of who it was. And I'm walking through the museum, I'm walking through the museum, I'm like, none of these look like this. And
Uh-huh.
finally we get to the artillery officer's uniform,
Right.
and that was the uniform that this guy was wearing. And there
Wow.
was an artillery officer killed on Little Round Top Territory.
Hmm.
And the artillery officers didn't live long. Like, they were very young.
Okay.
Like, 21 was old for an artillery officer.
Really? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, I understand from an earlier conversation we had before the show that your house is haunted, as well as the
Yes.
grounds.
Yes. Very much.
And then I'm going to ask you this other question. What is an Alberwiki?
Albatwitch.
Albatwitch. Okay. What is an
Albatwitch.
Albatwitch? I've never heard of that.
So
Now, Candy mentioned that to me, but I have no idea what an Albatwitch is. What can you tell me what an Albatwitch is?
from what I can tell, it is very local to South Central and Central Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a muddling of the term apple snitch. And what these things are basically like little mini Bigfoots. So they look really strange. They're furry, like they're hairy. They're weird looking. I mean, they have kind of human-y features, but they're small. They're not big, and they would kind of come in apples and things, steal food from the PH that settled
Huh.
in the area, and so they got the name apple snitch because they would steal these apples and they'd steal fruits and things like that. So yeah, I've got one in my house.
All right. It reminds me of the story when my niece became a brownie. They told a story about brownies, how they're house helpers per se, and you left a little something out. It almost sounds similar, the story, what you're telling me about the apple twitch?
Apple snitch.
Apple snitch.
The apple
Okay,
twitch.
about that.
Yeah,
About the apple snitch.
it's apple twitch.
Sounds similar to the brownie. You know, the brownies of legend that the Girl Scouts use for their like voice, like Cub Scouts. You know, you got the Cub Scouts, where you got the brownies, and that's what it sounds similar. But that's interesting. I never heard of it before. But go on. I'm sorry,
it looks
but
less human.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the encounters you have in your home.
So there's a few. The original owners are still hanging out, and every once in a while I can smell the woman's perfume. And when we first moved in, we were renovating, and I kept seeing this shadow person standing there like watching me. And finally I was like, look, we're renovating your house because it's a gorgeous house and you did a great job building it. We're trying to get it back to what it was. So after that, had no problems after that. We had something outside the house, and I think the ghosts inside the house were keeping that thing out because it never made it inside. But
so they became protectors besides just little upset landlords.
And this thing outside, it kind of haunts the entire town. It's nasty, whatever it is. It's, you know, it's not a friendly thing. And I basically told them, like, yeah, you don't have to go home, but you're not staying here. And I gridded the yard to keep mostly just him out. But it keeps all nasty, but all the good stuff is allowed through.
Sounds like a trip for a ghost investigating team to come up there and do a town-wide investigation into that spirit. And it would be an interesting encounter or thing to do.
Cool. Yeah, it'd be really
I wonder
cool.
if it's related to a Native American spirit or something else.
I think it's probably the original settlers of the area back in the 1700s. There was a bit of a land dispute, and a judge basically told the person, yeah, by the way, you don't own any of this, and sent him back down to Maryland. and he wasn't
Wow.
happy about that. So yeah, he's still got that anger going on, and I think that's sort of what it is that just keeps hanging around.
I see. Now, Candy told me something interesting. You're going to have to tell me about this one. That you had a apparition walk through you.
Yes,
What
that was in
happened?
Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm.
I've always lived in haunted houses, and
Mm-hmm.
so I like the only place I've ever lived that was not haunted and is the weirdest place I've ever lived is in Florida. I lived in Orlando. The house was not haunted. It was like, I gotta get out of here.
It was normal.
And I moved north. Yeah, it was normal. I was like, I don't like it. But so I went to Gettysburg, and they have the Gettysburg Ghost Adventures there,
Right.
where you can do these extreme ghost tours and stuff.
I've heard about them.
And so, what's that?
I said I've actually heard about them. The tours.
Yeah, so I did it. I got one as a present for my birthday, and I was really excited. I mean, it's a place that the National Park Service used to use, and then they closed it down. So the house had been disconnected from electric, been disconnected from water, sewer, you name it. It was completely winterized and basically shut down. So it was perfect for getting out the K2 meters and stuff, because there should be no EMF in there at all. The only problem with the EMF meter is if you don't put your cell phone into airplane mode, then every time your cell phone gets a message or something, it's the K2 meter off.
Okay.
So that's one of the caveats. So I watched a bunch of people texting, like, oh, check out pictures that I just took. And then the K2 meter would go off, and I'm like,
right.
Yeah. So, but as I was standing there, like, they're showing us the equipment and everything, and I'm standing in the doorway, and I could feel something behind me, and I could feel it kind of just checking us out. And I was just like, there's something in that room. And then as I'm standing there, and they're showing us, and they're hitting the K2 meters, and like, see, nothing. But when it gets to a ghost, it'll light up. And as they were talking about that, I'm like, I turned around to say, there's something here. And as I said it, it came right through me and then went around the room and lit up all the K meters.
Wow. I've got an invite for
that was really that was not a fun experience. That's first and only time that's happened to me.
Wow. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna make you an offer. If you ever decide to come to South Carolina, I want to invite you to come down to Hell's Gate Cemetery with me. We'll put together a small team and go do a night paranormal investigation of this famous cemetery in Spartanburg, South Carolina. That's an offer I'm going to extend to you, since you're an author, and you might be able to write some really cool short stories or something about this. And maybe we'll get some good PR from it if you're interested in doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds fun.
I've got the connections, so we can get the authorization to go down there. And I would love to invite you to come down and be part of a paranormal party, to go down and spend a night in a cemetery doing all the Ghostbusting type stuff. How's that sound?
That sounds fun.
Yes, I hope so. It might be very eye-opening.
Unless it goes through me again, then it's not much fun.
Well, let me ask you this question. How does your events with the paranormal relate to your novels, and which books would you recommend to future readers to read that they might see some of your encounters in? Because I'd be curious too to know, so if I can know which books to put in my list to buy.
There's actually more than a few that have influenced my writing. Very specifically, though, The Watershed, For Sale or Rent, and there's one more. I'm trying to think of which one it is. I think I put it into Secondhand Sarah, but that one's more of like a blog I used to write, and I just collected all the posts because people, when my blog went down, people are like, well, what about Secondhand Sarah? And I was like, well, I'll just collect all the posts and put them in a book for you if you want them. And so I keep promising that one of these days I'm going to come back with Secondhand Sarah, but so far I've just done the book collection and that's it.
I got you.
But with the Watershed, that one is, so I really moved out of the city when I was little, and we lived on this non-working farm, and we had a hotel restaurant business, and the hotel was like 4 stories of haunted craziness.
Wow.
And yeah, and so up in the middle of this field, overlooking the hotel, was an irrigation shack, and we called it the Watershed because it's the watershed.
Right.
And inside of that building was a cistern, and it had these like corroded metal walls and stuff, and it was about a 10-foot drop down to the water inside.
Right.
And the water was kind of this milky white.
Ooh.
And yeah, so the adults told us not to go near this thing, and me and my cousins were just like, not a problem. That place is creepy as hell. So, and it was always overgrown, and it never seemed to have a way in.
Right.
So, I'm sure it had a door. It probably had a door, but it was like sagging, and the roof was falling in, and I swear I saw like, old animals in there that had 100 years ago. So, we had a lot of these buildings that were falling down, and we'd go climbing through them because,
you're kids.
We're kids.
What do you expect?
We're kids. There's abandoned buildings to explore, and there are abandoned buildings. So, so we did. And that Watershed was one of the places that we did not mess with, because if we accidentally fell into the cistern, we were done. Like, there's no way anybody would be able to get us out without, a rope. And I think we inherently knew that, and so we just stayed away from it.
Right.
But that entire building inspired the Watershed from the story.
Okay.
And that ties into For Sale or Rent. It also tied into the book that I'm working on right now called The House, the Circle, and the Square.
You want to give us a hint on the house on this one? Sneak preview?
It is set in the town of Diggs Choice, which is the old name of the town that I currently live in.
Okay.
And for the locals, they will get a chuckle out of it because there is no longer a circle. It is a square. They took the traffic circle out back in 1968 and just put in all these traffic lights. There's a lot of traffic circles. And there used to be a park and a really cool fountain and everything way back in the day. And so I thought, wouldn't it be really cool if there was a house in the middle of it all? This like crazy, weird old Victorian in the middle of this traffic circle in the square.
Something out of the Addams Family?
It's sort of, but like cheerier looking. Like it's more like Uncanny Valley sort of AI art. Creepy, where it looks really pretty at first glance, and then you start looking at it and it's off.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's a cistern in the basement of that house, and it's connected to the Watershed cistern.
Okay. Travelway Force Amphibian Monsters. Ooh. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Something like that. It's the For Sale or Rent is a lot more Lovecraftian. So is the Watershed. House in the Circle and the Square is a bit more paranormal-ish, more like haunted housey. So I'm having a lot of fun writing it because I'm doing a lot of historical insertion into the story.
Okay.
So
it sounds like you got a full platter going on between dealing with your paranormal friends, writing, your family. I didn't ask anything about your family, and I'm going to respect that by not saying anything you're asking. So I'm sure you got a full plate with them and your other any other activities you may have. So you're probably well-rounded and well-busy. But like I was saying, when you get ready to take a vacation, come down to South Carolina. We'll put together a paranormal hunt, and we're going to go to Hell's Gate.
Definitely.
and go visit a graveyard. How's that sound?
I like it.
So, all right. You got anything you want to add before we get ready to call it a night on the show?
Spooky.
Okay. Do you have a Facebook page or a web page that folks might be interested in looking at for you? Because we'd love to send people your way. Tell us so that they know.
I'm Suzanne Madron on Facebook, and I'm Suzanne Madron on Instagram and Blue Sky, and pretty much like all the social medias. You can find me. Just take the space out from between my name, and that's my username on all the platforms.
Awesome.
And you can also search that name on Amazon and find my author page on Amazon.
Great. Well, Susan, I appreciate you being here tonight, and hopefully there'll be some opportunities in the future where I'll ask you to join us again as a co-host, maybe a guest again for some other opportunities to discuss other subjects. And I've enjoyed your company. I hope you have a good evening the rest of the night, and look forward to seeing you here in the future again.
Yes, definitely.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to my producer and let him do his magic. Ed, it's your ball.